Okay, welcome back from lunch. We're going to work with strings. This is something you're going to end up doing over and over and over and over again because it's advisable to set up strings and use those strings in your XML, your layouts and stuff, and everywhere possible, because if you set the strings, you put them in a string XML file, which is a special format, then you can set the localization to different languages, and you can automatically translate those strings into everywhere in your program, and you can automatically turn your entire program into a different language without having to go through each line of code and change the value of certain things to different languages. So it automates the process. It also helps you organize data. In this tutorial, we're going to see it being used to actually as a different purpose. We're going to put it into an array and look at a string array and load the string array into a list box. And so we'll see multiple things work together. So if you haven't found it yet, I believe it is called strings, and it is out on the bhacker.com website, and it is right here, strings tutorial. There's also a solution file to this. And some of you who had problems earlier with the context and some of the other issues, if you download the solution to context, check that out. If that works on the emulator, did yours work on the emulator? Did you do it yet? Download the context solution. If you have the same problem, then the problem is not with your code. It's with the configuration of your emulator, because it should work. If it doesn't work, then we got issues. I also updated this one a few minutes ago. I just replaced it with another one only because I wanted to make sure it included the manifest change for the permissions so that we don't have that problem as well. I don't believe the original one I had up there, I put it in there. I'm not quite sure if it did or not. I didn't even look at it. I just replaced it with the one I was working on in class that I know that works. Okay, so let's take a look at strings. Here we go. It's not good practice to include raw strings, as I mentioned before. It's called inline in the code. That's when you just put the string text in there, especially when writing and debugging. It's generally speaking, Android applications rely on these string content to display on the screen. So this data belongs to the Android resource, not to the code itself. So there's a number of benefits to including it. You can read through this on your own. I'm going to skip to the heart of the tutorial. So the PDF file has a lot of reading in it. Obviously, slower pace, you can read it on your own. Open up Eclipse. If it's not opened up already, I'm going to open up mine fresh, which is one of the things I like to do actually, occasionally, especially when I have things that are becoming out of sync. If I have too many versions of it opened up, I actually do occasionally just shut everything down and then load it back up, believe it or not. Eclipse is actually buggy. It's a little buggy. So if you're having problems, things just aren't moving fast enough for you, because it does slow down a little bit. There's a few memory leaks in it, so not a bad idea to close it down and start it back up occasionally. So we're going to start a new project, start a new Android project, and this one's going to be, again, the same type we've been using before with a blank activity. So I'm going File, New. This is old information. You should be able to do this, Other. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to click Android Project, Android Application Project. Click on Next. I'm going to call this one Strings. And I'm going to change the package name to edu.itu. That way I can keep track of stuff. And I'm going to leave all the defaults on there alone, and I'm going to click Next. I'm going to click Next again, and then I'm going to click Next again. They need to have just a Finish button. This needs to be highlighted at this point. So, new blank activity. I'm going to click Next again, and then main activity. That's pretty good. I clicked on Finish. So I've gotten this far. I've created a brand new project that's in the process of being created. It's called Strings. I'm going to open up Strings as soon as my round wheel stops moving. It does take a few minutes. In fact, when you make changes, it actually sometimes does take a few minutes as well, given the memory on the system. For example, you see this little red thing here, and you're wondering, I'm wondering, why does it say red? There's nothing wrong with this project. I just made it. But give it a few minutes. The red X goes away. So you have to, I guess you have to exercise patience. In the resource directory down here on the bottom, we see this little menu called Values, a little submenu called Values. Inside the Values menu, I have this thing called strings.xml. In strings.xml, I'm looking at the GUI component here. I have 1, 2, 3 strings that are given to me by default. One of them is called app name, and underneath it says value strings. Okay, that's the name of my app. Actually, that's what I called it. Under here, menu settings is going to be called settings. Hello world is a string here. It's called hello world. If we look at the XML file that's associated with the main activity main, if I double click on this guy, and if I look at the the XML code, I see this @string / hello world. That's showing my hello world string. This is where I was saying before, it's not a good idea to take this out and just type something in. Then that's what's called inline hard setting the string. Better to put it in a file and then take and load the file. So in here we've got, that's the only string I'm using actually, it looks like. In here we can use the other strings anywhere you want. In any of the interfaces you can use these strings. You call it using the @string and then just the name of the string. So this is the key, hello world. So when I take a look at here, this is hello world, the value is hello world. So I put the key in and then I get the value that shows up on the screen. So that's what the strings are about. So let's see what we're going to do here. We're going to create a string resource. So string resources belong in the resource value strings strings folder. So we're going to find a string resource, and then we're going to enter for all of these different strings in here we're going to use for our application. We're going to name our string resource appropriately. For example, the following XML excerpt defines a number of colors as individual strings. So we can alter the code in strings.xml to include these colors. So we have an open resource tag and a close resource tag. And we see we have the definition. So let me go back and take a look at the XML code for this. If you're a GUI person, you may use the GUI interface. If you're using the GUI interface, you're going to use an add button and you're going to follow stuff in. I don't use the GUI interfaces because I'm not a fan of GUI. I use the XML code. For some strange reason, that just looks more intuitive to me. So you may follow along with me, or you may do it the GUI way if you'd like. But what we're going to do is we're going to add in between the resource start and the resource end tag. I'm going to put this stuff on the bottom and just leave it in here. These are the predefined strings that I received when I created the app. I'm going to create another set of strings here. The strings that I'm going to put in that I'm going to use in this example are going to be colors. So I'm going to have color orange, blue, pink, red, cyan, yellow. You can make up your own colors. And then underneath that you see I have the app name and I have the menu setting hello world. That's the same stuff I had before. We can have a string in here and not use it. I can take out hello world and not use it at all. I don't have to use it just because I put it in. So I'm going to try and cut and paste this actually and stick these colors in here. We're going to load the colors into a box, so you want to make sure you have, I believe I've hard set the number of strings. So I believe I have, let me count them when I paste them in here. Alright, so what was that? Shift something? Control. Shift, Control, F. Control, Shift, F. Control, Shift, F. No. Command, Shift. Command, Shift on my keyboard. Command, not Control. On a MacBook. Oops, but, oh, they're still here. That's very good. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. And they're all under a different name. They're following the same format as the built-in ones we got initially. So this is how you're adding a string, either using it in an XML format or using it by the menu. We're putting some colors in here because I'm going to take the colors and use it out in my main activity. And I'm going to do something with it. And you'll see in a few minutes what we're going to do. So go ahead, add some colors to your project. And then when you're all done, I like to save this file, make sure it works. See if I don't have any error messages. When you save it, it automatically updates the r.java actually. So right now I could immediately go over and take a look at it. And it should be up to date if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave it alone. So it's in the, while I'm continuing to talk, you can fill in the strings. Or you can cut and paste and do what I did. Put that into the string.xml file. So note the color underscore prefix I've used in here for each one of the string resources. It helps remind team members as well as myself that they are related. They're all colors, underscore orange, underscore blue. We can't have any spaces in the string names. You can't use any dots either, but the underscore is a legal character. So I'm going to say all these are colors so I can keep track of it later on. So if I have like an email program and in the form, there's an email form, I can say email underscore name, email underscore address, email underscore something, and I can keep track of all those strings by the email form if I'm calling it that way. So it's just a practice I probably want to get into. So for this example, we might use them all together, and we're going to use them all together in an array, and we're going to display the options in a spinner control. So we're going to see what a spinner control looks like. One of the examples actually has you use one of the homework assignments actually has you use a spinner for something. So we got a spinner. So we're going to load the string resources programmatically instead of dragging and dropping and sticking it on the XML canvas. Actually, our last project today, we're going to build a tic-tac-toe game programmatically. Hopefully that works. With a blank canvas XML file, and we're just going to put it all in the code, add the images to it, and that's kind of our capstone project for this weekend. So let's see. We can easily load a string to use the code in a getString fashion, which is what we're going to use. So the following code should be dropped into the activity class to load the string resource defined in your application. Don't add this code to your project, but here is what is going to be used. Okay, so if we wanted to use the strings, this is another, we're not going to actually do it this way, but it's basically showing you how you can create a string. Here we have a string myColor. MyColor is going to be equal to getResources dot getString r.string dot color underscore orange. So it's showing you the syntax. If you wanted to create a variable called myColor, or actually in this case I'd probably call it orange or something because it's actually loading the orange color. And you're attaching it to a string, and the string is the string that you've got defined. So a handy thing for loading strings this way, if you can divide out alternative resources in different languages, so it's appropriate for certain things upon the device. So no special code is needed to work with this. You just load a string in, kind of like the way we get the context view to the layout of the main layout. So that's just for practice. You don't need to load it programmatically this way, but if we wanted to, we could. So we're going to define a string or a resource using a string resource reference. So if you wanted to create an array of those characters, those colors that we have set in the strings, you can load them up individually in a Java code and make a string array in memory. But you need to know each one of the resources' full ID. Remember this way we did the full ID on here. So each one of the full IDs and the references in the code. Instead, the best way to do this, best bet is to create a string array. So we can just create a string array resource, which is different from a string resource, and then reference the individual string resources that have already been created, tying them all together in an array. So string array resources are best stored in arrays.xml. So we have strings.xml that's representing strings, and then we have arrays.xml. So we're going to define a string array with an item for each one of the strings, and we're going to use it in the application. So instead of using each one of those strings, we're going to use the string array, put it into a component, and then thumb through them. So name your string array appropriately. For example, the following XML excerpt defines an array that contains each one of the colors defined here. So this is the thing we want to do. We want a values file. So we're going to go File, New, Other, XML Values file to get the file. And enter the name arrays. We can call it anything we want. We're going to call it arrays so we can remember what we're going to pull into the component later. With any, don't put the extension will be in there automatically. So let's go to Xcode. We want to stick it though in the values menu. So the values menu, the values directory or package or folder, whatever you want to call it. It's not a package, I'm sorry, it's a folder. So click on the values, come on up, File, New, Other, and down towards the bottom it says Android XML Values File. And then click on Next. And then we're going to call this Array. Is it Arrays or Array? Let's take a look. I believe Arrays, A-R-R-A-Y-S. So call it Arrays. And then click on Finish. And then now we have a new component over here called Arrays. If I click on the resource here, Resources, I see it's empty. If I click on the Arrays XML file, I see I've got another resource that looks like a regular old string file. And it is, actually. It's just going to hold values. Let's see. So we need to actually create the string array component. So in between resources, if you look at that file in there, if you turn on the editing mode, we're going to add a new tag called a string array. And the string array, the name is going to be colors array. It can actually be on one line. It's inside of the start tag. And then what are we going to do? We're going to add items to it. So this is very HTML-like, actually. And the item that we're going to add here is the color from strings. So we're going to use inside of the array that we're creating, we're using tags to the strings. We're not going to like retype the strings. We're going to use a reference to the strings. Because everywhere in the program from this point forward, we're just going to reference it. So we're referencing this to make our life easier. It kind of automates the process, takes all those strings and puts them all into one instead of multiple. And it's keeping it in a separate file called arrays, which is keeping track of our arrays separately. It's making the abstraction easier for us to remember later down the road. So I'm going to just cut and paste this start and end tag here. I don't need the resources, don't need anything else. I'm going to copy this here and I'm going to stick it inside the resource here that we've created, in between the resource opening and closing tag. And this is inside of arrays.xml. So I'm going to paste it again. I'm going to press the Shift Command F to format it. And I've got my color orange, blue, gray, yellow. That's just 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have all 6 of them now. It's called colors array. So now I can take this a step further and use arrays, @arrays, because that's the name of my file. It's not @strings anymore, but it's @arrays, colors array, and reference that in the code. So it's kind of a hierarchical step here. I took the strings, the @string, and I'm using them inside of the @array, and the array is going to essentially hold all the strings. So cut and paste and put that code in there and go ahead and save it when you have it ready, so that the r.java file, everything can be updated correctly. You shouldn't have any error messages in that particular case. I'll open it back up for anyone who's still writing it. That looks like that. So now we're going to load the string array resource programmatically. Well, we're not going to do it, but this is how we would do it. So for a single string up here, this is a nice review for those people who don't have very much of a programming experience to them. This is a single string is the data type. And the variable name is my color, and it's going to be equal to, well, we're going to get it from r.string, is where we're getting it from, which is our string.xml file. And it's color orange, that we're going to get the string from the get resources. So get resources goes to that resource folder, gets the resource. And the resource we're getting here is a string.h. So we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to do it programmatically. And don't write this in here, it's just for illustrative purposes. If we wanted to make an array, well, we use the string array syntax, which is similar to C++ if you're familiar with that. Now it's an array of my colors. It's the same code as before. It's exactly the same way, except for here we're taking it from arrays. So it's no longer coming from strings. We're taking the array, copying this. This is in an XML file, we've basically created an array of strings that we can just copy from the resource into a variable that we're going to use programmatically in the code. So we can use my colors as an array in the code, and it works out just fine. It works out great. So referencing the array, in terms of, this is the code we're going to use for it. So we're going to go to the interface, it looks like here. So referencing the array string resources in a simple spinner control. One useful reason to do this is to populate a control that requires the data adapter that we're going to use. The simplest way is to use an array. Using an array resource helps you skip through multiple steps. Example of spinner control. So our spinner control, we're going to define, so this defines a spinner control, and we're going to put the spinner control inside of our layout. So I'm just going to cut the spinner control here. Copy. Go back here. And I'm going to close my arrays. This is why I like to close things so I don't accidentally paste it into the wrong file. Now I'm going to go to my layout. What we're going to do is take this layout, and the purpose of this is just to put it in a spinner. We're going to take the array and automatically populate it into a spinner. So I'm just going to stick it right here above my text. I can get rid of the text if I wanted to. So if I paste it in, fix the format, now I have a spinner control. The spinner control is using my @array colors array the same way that my label here is using, actually I could change this label to the app name if I wanted to. It's using my hello world string. So if I change the value of hello world, it says something else. Well, I just basically have this generic label, this generic text view that shows up. So in here I have an ID spinner of colors, and here we have match parent, wrap parent. Well, wrap content. We'll just leave it at the defaults, which actually comes up automatically. I'm gonna look at layouts in a few minutes. After this assignment, after this tutorial, we're gonna go through a bunch of layouts and just show you the layouts. Because if we build 6 layouts, we'll never get out of here. So I'm gonna show you the layout projects, and we'll see. The light bulb will click on instantly. But for the purposes of explaining this, this is the arrays versus the string. So it's going into our array resource, which is in our values menu, values directory down here. We also have styles that we can use. Styles are going to change essentially different components that we have access to for properties of different GUIs or widgets. So that's to make something a darker color, lighter color, I don't know, change the motif. So this defines the spinner control that will show each one of the colors and the options as shown here. So if we run it, the spinner control should work. So at the end of the onCreate method, however, we can make an instance of that spinner control and then put up a toast message when we click on something. So at this point, we could test out the interface actually. And it's helpful kind of to see how the pieces of it are fitting together. We've created the array, we've taken the array, we've added it to a spinner control, so it's using the array with no programming essentially. Very little programming. Oops, I believe I have to set my connection. Now my spinner is looking different in the example because it's not expanded. If I click in my app here, and if I press this little arrow over here, I can expand it out, and then I get the picture that's in the PDF file. And then I can actually select one of these if I wanted to, one of the options, but it's not going to do anything. It changed it up here, it says pink up here. And then like here it's going to say I've selected cyan. So what we're going to do is figure out, well, what's the purpose of that? So in the onCreate method, when we create this, we're going to put some functionality behind this. It's going to put up a toast message. So it connects all 3 pieces. So we've got the strings connected to the array is connected to the spinner is connected to the .java file, the main activity.java, which is going to control the spinner. So we connect all the pieces together. This is a very typical way of adding some GUI components. So I'm going to go back now to the code and finish it out a little bit here. And what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to close this. I don't need it anymore. I'm going to go back to the source code for this, and it's main activity. Main activity is just coming up, and it's loading, setting the context view to the activity main, which is where we put that spinner. So I'm going to put some code in here, and let me show you the code I'm going to put in here. I'm going to create a spinner just like we created an edit text and a text view. I'm going to create an object, and it's going to be called color spinner, and color spinner is going to be getting the spinner of colors, which is the ID that we set on the control that we put in the interface XML file that is loading up that colors, the array inside of that object. And we're going to put color spinner set an on item selected listener. So we're going to select the listener on there. And we're going to say new adapter view on item selected. Well, it's going to be giving us the control that's going to come back from on item selected. And then on each item, on item selected, we're going to simply put up this toast message that gives us what item was selected. And what item was selected is going to come back from string chosen color. And chosen color is going to be the item essentially that we are getting back from the method call, from the event that's occurring. So I'm going to cut and paste and stick this in here, format it. Make sure. Okay, good. That's just the rest of the code. If your cutting and pasting works and you don't want to like do it in piecemeal, you can do it this way. But we're just basically adding this to the end of the uncreate menu here. So I'm pasting this in. And I'm going to have to add a spinner. So I'm going to import the spinner. And I'm going to have to add an on-click selection. Nope, an adapter view is what I'm going to need to add, adapter view. And add unimplemented method. Well, we have a method down here actually. Which unimplemented method are we referring to? And this is why I don't like to cut and paste. Okay. On item selected. Well, we have an on item selected adapter view parent argument too. Well, let's take that out. So now what I'm going to do is, because my cutting and pasting isn't working appropriately for me and I'm really not happy with it, I'm going to take the finished product and put the main file in there so that I can add the code without having to type it. So I called it, what did I call it? String resource. So if you download the finished product, open it up in import it into Xcode, click on the main Java dot, and I'm going to take everything from, without the includes, I'm just going to take the entire, there we go, entire body. I'm going to cheat sheet, I'm going to stick it in here because cutting and pasting isn't working for me today. There we go. Paste it. And get rid of this one. Get rid of this one. When we do cut and paste, as you notice, actually, I get some interesting extra stuff added. Remove that extra stuff. Don't leave it in there. It's because this was referring, the original code was referring to the r.java file from my original project up here that I cut and pasted it from. It tried to add it to the top. In fact, it tried to put the package in there too. But I'm going to get rid of this because I don't need this in this project either. Those were the two samples. So if you cut and paste it, make sure to remove any reference to r.java, any reference to, in fact, you know what, I'm going to back out here and show you what this was just so you know. I'm undoing the changes that I made. Oops, redo typing. There we go. For reference here, because I cut and pasted it in, the metadata that was held with this file that I don't actually see in the file, I have some hidden information that's in this file that's not showing up. It's associated with what I cut and pasted, and when I cut and pasted, it came out of a different project. It came out of one that was called string resources. So it's going to try and fix, it's going to try and think for me. So it puts these two lines of code up here. Or if I haven't, and sometimes down here it will recommend that you put these lines of code up here, it means there's confusion and it's an Xcode issue. Trying to auto-generate the includes that I need, the imports that I need, which are wrong because I'm not using it in that project, I'm using it in this project. So this is what I deleted. I deleted all this reference to this project over here where I pasted the file from. It's an Xcode issue. Excuse me, it's an Eclipse issue. We're working with Eclipse today, not Xcode. It's an Eclipse issue. Xcode actually doesn't have that problem. But anyway, so I removed it because it didn't like my cutting and pasting. So now I'm going to close both files here and make sure that they're saved correctly. Now if I run the application itself with the corrected code to implement it, when I click on the items in the spinner, it should now put up a toast message. And the toast message is going to be the item that I selected. So if I go back to this project over here, and now if I click on here and I select pink, I have a toast message. It comes up and says pink on it now. Not really doing anything with it, but perhaps you have a menu going on here. And there's a way of making this actually, when you load the project, set the property of the spinner to open it up, show 5 items. This is showing nothing, it's showing 1 item. It's like a list box in XML, excuse me, in HTML, where we can have it show 5 items or something, a drop-down box, populate it with some information and show the first 3 items or something. But in this particular case, I could make a menu out of this, and then when the user clicked on yellow as an example, something could happen for the yellow. So what's going on then back here with this cut and pasted code is that this is garbage. This is just examples about how to use it. Here's our spinner, color spinner, and we're basically making a new instance of this object, and then we're taking this object and we're setting the onSelect listener. It's not an onClick, it's on a selection. So it's onSelected listener. And on the selected listener from the view, adapter view, we are taking and on the selected item, we're getting the position from the view. And then we're creating a string, and the string is going to be string chosen color, and the chosen color is going to be the string parent.getItem at position position. Because the on item selected is going to bring back to us, it's going to we're going to get through the method the position number, so it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3 for our array, and then that's going to be populated into this string chosen color associated with the text that's associated with it. And then we're going to put up the toast message. And then that's basically all we added to the main program. So it kind of shows you how to use multiple components with very minimal, actually it's very minimal programming actually to create that array, to populate it out. And then now everything is stored in a string, so we can change this program to be in a different language by changing the locality.
Exporting the exact same file and put on my phone. I don't see any colors.
You put it on your phone and no colors come up. Can you open it up? I see colors.
I see citrus, blazing blue.
No. I mean, aren't they supposed to be in that? Is the font supposed to be in that?
Oh, no. Oh, I'm sorry. These are just showing you a list box. It's not going to be in those colors. You could change it, though. You can change the background color of the spinner item. No, yours is working. I like your color selection, the blazing blue. Interesting selection of colors. Now, this is color as a concept in theory. It's not changing any colors on the screen. You can actually make it change colors on the screen. I'm not going to do it right now. But I actually have an example probably that does it, so I'll point it out when it comes up. So, any other questions on the strings? So it's a very easy, straightforward tutorial. Yeah. See if you can get your strings to work. What I'm going to do now is kind of close this project and point you into another direction and then show you some code that's already written for you. So if you're still working on your strings, you can continue working on that. The end of this tutorial has a little bit of reading about what you did. If you want some more background information on what's going on, go ahead and read through the rest of the PDF file. Out at bhacker.com, I've got another thing out here called layout examples. This is a zip file. You need to download this file. So it's called layout examples. When you download layout examples, you're going to have, let me find layout examples. Here they are, AP layout examples. Inside this, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects. I believe I have successfully imported in most of them. I might have one left here, and I probably do. I have grid view, layout 2, 3, 4, 5. I think linear layout. Not linear layout. I have 6 of them in here. So let me take one out. Do I have relative in here? Oops, let's see. I don't have the relative layout in here, so I can add this one in. I believe that's why I left this out. So let me show you how you get these projects in. So hopefully you're in Eclipse. You're going to go File, and you're going to down here on the bottom where it says Imports. Select Import. Select Existing Project into Workspace. Next, click on Browse. And then this was on my desktop, so I'm going to click on the desktop, and it's in App Layouts. And what I want is the one that says Relative Layout Example. You can actually do all of them. There's 6 of them total. I'm going to show you different layouts. Right now we've been working with linear layouts, kind of boring. I'll show you what I mean by that. And then relative layouts probably. Actually, I think we've probably been working with relative layouts. But let's finish here. So click on Finish after you select the project, and then I've got it in here. So I'm going to start with a basic linear layout and then work through the layouts, and what I'm going to do is just show you what they mean and what we're talking about. These are all Hello World programs. Not really doing much. If I click on the resource directory, go into the layout subfolder and click on main. It's an old project type that was created that doesn't have activity_main, it just has main. Big difference is this on the top, linear layout. Linear layout in this particular case is what we've been looking at so far. We have button 1, button 2, button 3. If we look at the graphical view of this, it's linear because of this. Auto-adjusted on the left-hand side of the screen. When you run it, it looks very similar to this, actually. There's no functionality. I don't believe there's any functionality here, but we'll see in a few minutes. It might just be setting up a toast message or something. The examples are not meant to be very functional. It's just showing you different layout options. In some particular cases, it makes sense to have this. But what we're getting is a line, so we have the buttons. Nothing's going to happen when we click the buttons. It's just going to look like this. It's just the like, whoops, button 1 is controlled to something, but it's controlled to Google, looks like. So let's take a look at the code real quick here, actually. Let's see. If I look at the XML version of this, I see the button number 1 has an ID of button 1, ID of button 2, ID of button 3. But then we have the layout weight is equal to 1, which makes button number 3 a little bit bigger. So we know that we can drag and drop at this point, and that we can stretch this way. So we can stretch this way. Oops. Well, we have hard set the value. There we go. I've moved in between here, but I've set the weight of this so that it's bigger, so that it will probably not rotate correctly. But the concept here is the linear layout puts everything on the left-hand side. It puts it all down. Some of these examples have interesting things added to it. This one here, it actually does. It has a web view in it. So on the linear layout activity.java, which is built in here for you, we can see that buttons here, we have a button. This should look a little familiar to you. It's the same thing we did with the 2 buttons example. We added a listener on the button by running this method. So for those of you who want yet, okay, so you've seen 2 so far. You've seen creating the button, adding the listener onto the button, which is one method. Taking in the button properties, adding the action for the onClick event. That's number 2. Here's number 3. Write a method. And what's the method going to do? It's going to, here with the add listener on button, and if we write the method, we just call the method. So inside of onCreate, we are setting the context view to main, and we're calling this method here. The method is an add listener on button. So we can take button 1, which is the first button, and we're going to set the onClick listener so that when it onclicks, we're going to create an intent. So going back to the intent concept, here's another example of using intents. So intent is equal to new intent. So it's like the object name, the object instance name, we're going to call it intent. It's going to be equal to new intent. Create a new intent with the intent action view. And the action view is going to be a UI parse where we're giving in a URL. So it's going to set up a URI component that loads a URL into the view. Not using a web view. I'm going to show you the web view in a few minutes, but it's not using a web view. Instead, it's just using this component. Makeshift way, and then start activity intent. So when you click on the first button, my internet access isn't working as fast as it should be, but it's loading up the URL. And not a web view, but it's a URI compatible browser view. So it's loading this internet website. Apparently the internet's running a bit slow right now because it's not loading, but it should be loading. So if I click the escape button, I go back to my buttons. So button number 2 doesn't have anything, button number 3 doesn't have anything, but button number 1 is loading an intent. So it's a great way of showing you how to take the intent concept to the next level and have it controlled with button clicks. We just called it button 1, probably should have called it like Webview button, because then after looking at it again I probably wouldn't remember anyway. But this is the code here that's doing it. I have another example in the same folder here that's called Webview Layout example. So load that one up next, and we'll take a look and compare that technique with this one. This is using a linear layout, just throwing a bunch of buttons down there. When you click one of the buttons, the button action is loading up through an intent. It's creating a new intent and it's loading up www.google.com. And it's starting the activity for the intent. So it's basically creating a new, not an activity, it's an intent that's loading up a web page. So you could set it with a bunch of URLs, and then when you press the buttons it loads up the URLs. It's loading it up in a browser window that's controlled by the phone, because it's not actually adding a web view to the app. So I'm going to close linear layout for a moment. You might be still playing with it, that's fine. I'm not going to save any modifications, I don't think I did anything to it. And I'm going to double click and open up, bring in Webview Layout example. All of these are in the same folder that you downloaded with the layouts.zip file. So in the web view, we're actually, instead of using, in fact let me just click on the view so we can kind of see what we're looking at. In the resource folder we're going into the layout, and I have main XML, same as before, but on main XML I'm using again another linear layout. And I have one button on the layout. And the one button on the layout, on the button it says go to www.google.com. That's the label. That's not the action. That's a label set for the text. And then I'm calling the button URL because I don't want to call it button 1, because how am I going to know further down the road what button this was? So I put a button on a main layout. Main layout looks like that. It's the same as our other linear layout, but instead of 3 buttons it only has 1. Then we created another one, and this one's called Webview Dot XML. So you go File, New, create a new XML file. We know how to do that. We've already done that. So we'll save a little bit of time with this. And then in here I'm going to click on it. It's the only thing on here is what's called a web view. A web view is a special kind of view that's going to be loaded in. It's going to set the layout of the view to a web page. Here it is. Instead of using a linear layout, relative layout, and some of the other ones I'm going to show you in a few minutes, we have web view. So the only thing on this XML interface is this web view, opening and closing tag. And the web view we're going to call it Webview 1. And this is the same opening tag that you get for linear, for relative. It's the same thing. It's going to load APK, resource, Android, web view. It's a special kind of view. A special kind of it's actually a layout, actually, but it is a view as well. When we look at maps, probably not till the end of this month when we come back again for the intermediate. The maps, a little bit more complicated, so we have to get a map key for that and use it, but that uses a map view as well. In the map view, we can actually switch it and use a Google Map view if we want to, which is what we're going to do for this class. But we see we have the same properties as before. We're going to have an ID. It's going to be called Webview 1, and we have some fill properties and fill parent, So we're going to fill it up because the Webview one, we want to take up the entire parent. So in the create menu on here, well, we have two things. So same thing that we did for name getter and hello world. Actually, everything is patterned after that first hello world application, which is kind of important that you kind of at least see how that works. Remember when we created name getter, a separate class that controlled a separate view, and the view was getting the name from the user, and you were pressing a button, and it was calling an intent that was sending it back to the main view. Same thing all over again here. Making an instance of a Webview. So we have a private Webview. So we declared an instance over here. It doesn't really need to be private. It's more of a protective mechanism at this point because we want this controller, this Java activity file, to control the view. So we're going to keep it inside. Keep it private. Here's the new code. I commented it out from the example you might have to show you a couple of different examples. In this code here, we're taking Webview is going to be equal to the Webview. Find view by ID, Webview 1. Well, that's the Webview that we created in the layout. How do we know which layout we're using? In this file, we're setting the context view to layout Webview, which is this layout down here called Webview. So Webview XML down here is being set as the context view for this particular file, which is going to be the Webview activity. And then we're going to get the settings, and we're going to set the JavaScript enabled to true. In fact, every one of the Webview settings comes in under a different parameter. In fact, all you have to do here is just press dot and a big old, I don't know if there was, oh, here it is. That's not what I wanted to do. Get rid of this. If you put some spaces in here, put the dot down, you'll see a pop-up window that says all of the different options that you can set, all the different menu options, method options that you can set. You can turn Java on and off. This is we're just going to turn JavaScripting on. Why do we need to do that? Probably don't need to. Make it true. Change all the different parameters on the Webview inside of the code. You don't have to do any of it in the XML file. And then here is going to launch with the URL www.google.com. So let's say we don't want to do that one. We can create a string. That's going to be a custom HTML string. And then put the string in the Webview. So we can load a string. We can also put a file in here and load the file into the Webview. So some people like to build apps by creating websites and then taking the websites and sticking them inside of Webviews. Actually, Phonegap is geared towards that. There's a utility called Phonegap. Works great because you stick it in the asset folder. It's just a website that represents your application, and then you'll load your application in a Webview. That's what it's doing, essentially. Instead of writing a native app, because you can't figure out how to write a native app, you don't want to learn Java, so you put it all in a website, you load the website. So when your app comes up, your website loads up. It's kind of a makeshift way of creating an app. So in this case here, I'm going to do that same thing because I uncommented out Google. So pick whatever you want to put in there. Change the website if you want. Run the app. And you should see if you have internet access. You should see this is actually going to, whoops, save, could not be, save as, problem, persist. Open. I don't know. I had another project open, I guess. Let's see, this one should be running. Nope. Oops. Oh, it was running and I closed it. Now I have it installed on here. But which version do I have installed is the question. I have a Webview in here. I believe it's called Webview, so let's start with the W. Here we go, Webview app. Go to Google. Oh, no, this one's going to start my Hello Webview. So, actually, I think it did run it. It just didn't. I didn't wait for it. It closed it immediately. So this one says Hello Webview on it because down over here I put Hello Webview in the text here. So if I uncomment this out, actually I just have to take the Webview line that's loading data versus loading a URL, and then loaded the URL instead of the data. I don't know what's wrong with my linear layout.
Suppose if we have multiple buttons
Hmm?
and each one loading different web pages,
Mm-hmm.
can we group the on-click method for all the buttons, or do we have to create assign an on-click method for each button?
Your choice. You can put the on-click to call different methods, on each one of the buttons in the XML file if you want, or you can put one generic big old on-click for all of them, and then inside of the I got something was clicked, go, is it button number 1? Is it button number 2? Is it button number 3? That's probably the more popular way of doing it. Or you can go on-click over here, and then in the code go, well, if it's button number 1 on-click listener, button number 2 on-click listener, button number 3 on-click listener, and then have an on-click response for each one of them. I'd group them together though. I'd put them all together. Depends on how you want to do it, essentially. But now you see it's calling a web page, actually, so. And the on-click here, button on-click listener, yeah. If you did that, you'd have sets, because this private method is inside of here. So you could have button on-click listener, or you can put, make another one, button number 2 on-click listener, button number 3 on-click listener, button number 4 on-click listener, if it's easier for you. Or you could just put the on-click listener on. So. This is not a bad pattern. Otherwise, some people like to put it on in the layout. I don't know if it really belongs in the layout though. It's up to you. Questions on the web view. Questions on the linear view. Let's go to something more exciting. Actually, I'm going to close this one here. I think we have already seen the relative view many times. It's now the new default project. Oops. No, just not going to save anything. I'm going to close this because I'm getting really weird messages going on here. Relative view. Let's take a look at relative view. I have a better spacing. I have a button number 1. I don't think this one does. It does something. Loads the website. There we go. Same code as before. Button number 2, button number 3. The code in here is basically the same project but rewritten with different interfaces. So, and then we have the user with this. So we have a submit button down here that's not going to do anything. So what we have are many components that are put in relationship with other components. So the relative view, the interesting part about here is just to look at the layout. And in the layout, if we look at the XML code, we say relative layout up here instead of Webview. Same other code is the same actually. And then we have relative positions, layout right of, layout to right of, to left of, different ways of aligning it. Align parent right, align top, align left. You can put them as specify the order that you're putting the items in. So what you do is you find in one of those little reference books and you look up relative layout, and then you look up all of the different parameters that you can set for relative layout. You can actually order the positioning. You can position them to the center of this, right justified to that. And you can put items in relative relation to other items on the GUI. So it's all controlled through the relative layout, which is what you get by default. It used to be in linear layout, but now it's relative layout. So let's say we want to take it a step further and say, well, let's look at the grid layout. So those are the ones that are built in. The relative, the linear, the web view. Web view is not really built in. Let's take a look and let's run the grid view layout project to see what it's doing first, and then we'll take a look at the code. Here's the grid view. Looks like a grid. And what do we have in here? I have a label and an icon in each one of the grids. Fairly simple, actually. When we click on one of the icons here, I'm going to click on iOS. It's going to put a toast message up that says iOS, BlackBerry, Android. No functionality. We're just going to put up this really cool looking grid. So you can put things in a grid. Icons. Actually, you could probably come up with icons without borders, maybe, that look better. And then maybe make it into some sort of a weird menu kind of system. But you could build that quite easily. It's a grid component that we're going to put together. Actually, we're not going to put together. We're just going to see it put together. So let's take a look at the layout over here. And you can use these. I put these together and put them all together so that you can use them as examples. So when you let's do the grid layout. Then you go in and you can take a look at the example code. If it's in here, you can open up the project, look at the code, copy it into your project. It's a great way. It's pretty generic, pretty simple. It's not convoluted. So the intercomponent here is the mobile.xml. The mobile.xml, if I look at the XML code, it's each one of the little icons actually. It's an icon picture and a label. So we have a grid item, which is an image, and then we have a item label, what's going along with it. So we have the mobile that's inside of the other one. The other one's going to be main. So we have an image. How do we get the image in? Well, in the image folder for the resources, where do we put the images? Good question. I know the images are in here. There they are. They're under the MDPI. I got Android, I got BlackBerry, and then it's just the images are just repeated over and over again. So these are and they're JPEG images, which is a little different. You can put PNG, JPEG, GIF, anything that's compatible. And you can go online to see what exactly is compatible. But they're in the drawable directory. And I probably could have well, I knew they were in drawable, but I didn't know which subdirectory. You don't actually have to create a drawable. It will look for drawable dash whatever. HD, PI, LDPI, etc. So I have the 10 pixels for the margin, right? The height and the width is 50 by 50. So I've set these guys to be fairly generic. And the ID is this going to be a grid item image. It's going to be the ID that we're going to call these with. And the text is going to be a grid item label that we're going to put on it. And the label is going to be have the text of the ID label that's going to be associated with the grid. And then if we look at the ID for the label, we'll see that in the next file. So if I click now, I'm going to close this one out and click on the main. I see, wow, item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I got the grid view going on. Let's take a look at the code that's associated with that. It's just not too much, actually. So we have a grid view up here. And in here in the mobile one, I should have closed that one out here. It was a linear layout. So we're using a linear layout inside of a grid view layout. The grid view layout's giving us our spaces depending upon how big we want them in the form of a grid. So I'm going to go back to the grid view layout. So we're going to call this one grid view 1, and we're going to do auto fit, and the gravity is going to be center, so each one of those items are going to be centered inside of the cells. And the width is going to be 100 dp, so we're going to put a 50 size 50 by 50 image, so it's about 50 wide into 100 wide, so we're going to have some space around it. And we're going to stretch the mode to the column width of the phone, so it like pulls out the parent column width. And we're going to fill the height and everything, the height and length. So we have our grid view that's going to hold on to our images. And our images have, well, it's not really our images, they're called mobile. So those are the items. So let's take a look at the two things we have here, the two classes that are going to run this. We have the grid view activity. This is the main class. Actually, let me close these out. I'm not going to say any changes. We will be taking a break shortly, don't worry. Some of you are getting a little, I can hear it. I know. Alright, so I have a tendency not to take enough breaks, but okay, we'll take some breaks coming up. What are we going to do here? So this is the grid view main activity, and the main activity is going to create a string. Well, that's a different way of doing it. So in that example I gave you, we created a string array, called it array.xml, we put it in there. This is the other choice. People don't necessarily want to do that. There's no law that says you have to do it that way. But in here, if we change the strings and we decide we're going to make this international application or it's going to be in Italian or something, well, we have to go through here and change all the code inside of the file. So our strings aren't going to be automatically generated from strings. So what you could do is have multiple string files and you load the one in for the language that's going to be associated with it. So, alright, so here's our one. It's going to be called mobile. Our string array is going to be called mobile OS. It's going to be new strings to contain all this stuff. So on our onCreate method is going to load main, the main layout. The grid view is going to be equal to a new grid view. Well, we're going to get the grid view. So the grid view here is up here. So I'm going to create a new instance of this object, call it grid view. Get the grid view. The grid view is grid view 1. That's going to be the grid view 1 that we're going to create from, well, it's actually the grid view 1 ID that's on the, I should have left it open. It's on mobile. That's oops, it's main actually. That's the grid view one I'm talking about. That's the grid view. So let me go back to here. Grid view, set adapter, new image adapter, this mobile OS. Well, an image adapter is going to be an interesting concept. It's right here. So we made it. This is where we're getting to the point now where your Java skills are sort of more important. You can drag and drop and set components, and then you have to figure out, well, what are we doing? We're actually making our own object, and the own object we're making is called image adapter. And in here, we're creating a new instance of image adapter and setting it to the adapter of the grid view. So set the adapter to the new image adapter, and then we're going to go take a look at image adapter in a few minutes and see how that's composed. And then we're going to set an on-click listener for each one of them. So here's another way. I got, what, 6 or 7 or 12 buttons or something in there, and they're all using the same on-click listener. So what we're doing is we're going gridview.set on-click listener. We'll do it with something else if we have a container of items. And then on the item click, we're getting the position and the ID of the associated cells of 0, 1, 2, 3. It's sort of like an array, actually. And then we're setting up a toast message that's going to get the grid item label and put it in a text and put it on the screen. So it's not really too fancy. It's just getting the position number and taking the position number, finding the image and associated text from this image adapter. Let's take a look at this image adapter. Fairly simple. Image adapter is going to be our new image adapter, and it extends base adapter. So main activity is extending, whoops, let's get rid of, now we can get rid of this stuff. Is extending activity, it's our main. We officially just called it, didn't call it main, we called it grid view activity. This one here, we're now extending base adapter, which is another inheritance line, different inheritance line from activity, but it's an adapter inheritance line. So we have different types of adapters. This is one we're going to implement as a grid. But the adapters are going to be different pieces or components that we can sub-use inside of other components. Get a book on the adapters. That's the best way of learning it. You can't learn it. So it's a lot to absorb, actually, because the references on this is about 3 inches thick. Different types of adapters, different types of views, I'm just exposing you to a subset of it. There's a lot more out there. And that's where you have some basic skills, and then you can apply this to different types of adapters. We're just going to use a base. We have a list view adapter. Actually, we're going to see that in another example. But long story short, we're extending from an adapter type. We're going to set the context variable. So we have a variable for this. We have a variable for the string. And the string is going to hold our mobile values. Our mobile values are coming from that string that we have. So on the image adapter, which is essentially going to be our constructor here, we're going to take this dot context is equal to the context, and then we're going to take the mobile values, we're going to equal to the mobile values that we're going to get. On the view get view, which is going to happen automatically from the adapter, we're going to layout inflator. So this is the interesting thing. So we have this inflator. It takes the layout, dissects it into smaller little pieces, and it allows us to get at each one of the components. We need to get out the particular cells in the grid for the positions. So get system service for context layout inflator service. So we're taking the layout, we're inflating it, we're defining a view as a grid view. We're going to take the grid view and have it equal to the new view context. Contexts are going to be the sub pieces. If the context doesn't equal nil. Get the layout from the mobile XML file. So our inflator object is going to inflate mobile. It's going to inflate this layout. I'm sorry? When are we calling which one? Which method? Get view? It's grid view. It's not a method, it's a variable. Oh. Oh, down here?
No, just about that grid view. The method is grid view.
In here? In here.
Yeah, it's a grid view method. So,
it's happening through the automatic adapter behavior that we're going to experience. As I said, it's probably better at this point to to understand the true concept of it, pick up an adapter book or pick up a reference book that shows you view adapters. It's a view adapter. This is a base adapter type. We have different types. We have list view adapters, basic adapters, grid adapters, tabular adapters. So, and then you have the view that comes up automatically. So we're calling for the view and we're getting the view from the adapter, which is going to give us the grids in this particular case from our inheritance. At this point, just take it as something that's going to get called for us automatically. And it's an overriding a method that we're implementing from a class that we're inheriting from. So the view get view is from the view itself. So the view is going to get the view. The view is going to explode out, inflate out all of the different components that are part of the layout. Take those layout components and set the view context for each one of the grid views to that, which are the subviews. Get the layout for the mobile. This is where we're looking at the layout for mobile. And then we're going to set the value for the text field that's going to be populated in the mobile. So in the mobile we have the image and we have the text field that's associated with each one of the items that's loaded in the grid view. And then we're going to set the image base to the selected text, and which is going to be the grid item image, all coming from the same XML interface. And then we have a string here for mobile that's going to be the mobile values for positions, so that when we click on something, if this equals Windows, do something. If this equals iOS, do something. There's only 3 of them, but they're scattered out all over. We have multiples of each one of them. So we're just repeating it to fill up the grid, essentially. Else, grid view, set the context view, and then return the grid view. So we can get the count, we can get items, and we can get item ID, which are little methods that's going to return the item ID from an item that's clicked. If we're going to use that, but we're not using that. We're using from the position, we're using the text that's on the label. So that's why we're saying from the text that's on the label, from the position, which is going to be a string, we're going to get this text and we're going to sort it out. So it's another way of actually taking, you could apply the same concept to an on-click listener. And take the on-click listener and get the, what button did you click? Get the text from the label on the button. So you have one listener, put it on all the buttons. When the user clicks the button, get the text from the button and say, which button was it? Or get the ID of the button, anything that associates that button as a unique button, and then do something with the button, which is the way of doing it. So we didn't actually go over adapters, so that's why this is not the best in terms of understanding the source code for it, but know that we're implementing methods and we're overriding the behavior to adapt the adapter, or excuse me, customize the base adapter, which is what we're inheriting from. We're not using any interfaces in this case, we're just using basic inheritance. Kind of like what we do with activity. So when we run it, the grid activity will make an instance of image adapter, which will take those, create each one of the different components that's being populated into the grid view. That's kind of an intermediate interface, but it's understandable from a concept base. Writing the code yourself at this point, probably not there yet, especially if you don't know Java. But being able to make shift this example if you want to learn it. Actually, if you want to practice with it, you might change this example around and try to make it so, you know, cut down on the number of rows you have. Or actually, you can specify the rows for it, for the grid view. Add some different pictures in there, play around with the behavior, which is probably a good way of learning it. So, not really learning it, but getting a better feel for it. The goal is not to learn all of the examples and why they work, but to be able to learn the concepts and be able to apply them to your programs. You create programs. Okay, as I promised, I think everyone wants a break right now. Am I wrong? Because sure, like I keep going. I have a couple more. Maybe we'll take a break. All right, we'll take a 5-minute, 10-minute break. Okay, that's good. Because it is after lunch and people are just coming back. So.